Hi, good afternoon. When I was about 8 years old, right around this time of year, for 2 or 3 years in a row, my parents dressed me up as in what they called in a costume that they called a Chineser. And yes, you should be mortified that that's what they called the costume, a Chineser. And I know right now they'd be horrified if they knew I was telling this story, but here I am telling this story. So for 2 or 3 Halloweens in a row, in 1980, 1981, I dressed as a Chineser. I wore a traditional Asian conical hat. I wore kimono, heavy eye makeup, and what we called Asian silk slippers. And there they sent me off into upstate New York streets to do my trick-or-treating. I have been a perpetrator of cultural appropriation, and I am certain that I will unintentionally do so again in the future. So I ask you to suspend judgment as you sit with me in discomfort while I kind of go through some thoughts on what this confusing and often incendiary topic is all about. Loosely defined, cultural appropriation is when an aspect of an underrepresented culture is adopted by someone from another culture in such a way that its cultural significance is vulgarized or distorted. And just as a sidebar, when an underrepresented person adopts from a dominant culture, it is usually done for survival. Historically, underrepresented cultures had to adopt dominant elements so that they could survive, adapt, or not have any punitive measures pressed upon them. So though we have a loose definition of cultural appropriation, it's still very confusing for a lot of people. I mean, can't we be inspired or can't we like things from another culture? If I watch anime, speak Spanish, wear moccasins, if I eat Thai food, practice yoga, am I a cultural appropriator? Am I only taking the fun parts of one culture and disregarding an entire historical context? There are people who believe everything is cultural appropriation, from drinking tea to what Miley Cyrus did last week when she tried to make more money or get in the tabloids by imitating black culture. So what is the difference between respectful and mutual cultural exchange and damaging patterns of cultural appropriation? And the truth is, it's a thin line, and I don't know. The thin line is swervy, it's not straight, it's not pretty, it's not clean. It's curvy, it's loopty-doopty, it's twisty-turvy, and it sits in a space of nuance and context. I do believe, however, that it does have a starting point, and that starting point is history. In an article published by Everyday Feminism magazine, writer Maisha Johnson tells the real story of Pocahontas and compares her to Anne Frank. Disney portrays Pocahontas as a young girl who falls in love with Captain John Smith, thereby bringing peace to her Indian nation and the British settlers. She saves John Smith from execution. He goes back to England injured, but he has an open invitation to come back and visit Pocahontas whenever he'd like. It is a beautiful and romantic story. The minority perspective often goes, unfortunately, unexamined in an authentic way, both in media, movies, as well as in our academic institutions. So let's re-examine the story. Pocahontas' real name was Mato Aka. She would have been 10 or 11 years old when the British arrived. In her early teens, she was held captive for a year and was released in contingent with the fact that she would have to marry a British man who had taken a liking to her while she was in captivity. She did so. She was baptized. She was given a Christian name, Rebecca Rolfe. She was sent off to England and was put on a display as exhibition for propaganda in support of the new British colony. Mato Aka never returned home, and she died at 21. Pocahontas was not the Disney princess that we have all come to know and love. She was a real person whose life and story has been misrepresented so badly that we can hardly recognize it. Imagine we did this to Anne Frank. Most of us believe trivializing her life story would be in very poor taste, and I believe that too. Can you imagine the outcry if Disney made a movie about a young Anne Frank? They romanticize her diary. They age her into young womanhood. They have her fall in love with a Nazi soldier, and everything ends in a typical happy ending. Now imagine that if this Disney movie was also one of the mainstream culture's principal references to the Holocaust. Imagine the outcry if children dressed as Anne Frank alongside Pocahontas on Halloween night. It begs the question, why doesn't Pocahontas' harrowing life story deserve the same respect as Anne Frank's? So to me, this is what cultural appropriation can do at its absolute worst. It can trivialize violent historical oppression that has had negative results generation after generation. There are many social and historical implications to treating marginalized cultures as a costume. There are centuries of patterns and exploitation and stealing and violence that exist. So in the next few weeks, as you go out looking for that perfect Halloween costume, or maybe you go out looking for the perfect Halloween costume for your little one, I ask you to revisit the real story of Pocahontas and to consider dressing as a banana or a Rubik's Cube or a crayon or even a zombie. Thank you.